afternoon, everyone. I'm definitely grateful to be here, grateful for this opportunity. I really enjoyed doing this. I was able to be basically an exhibitor last year with my book, The 14 Virtues of the Good Father. So I definitely enjoyed my time there being in your presence on last year. And so when I was asked to come back this year to conduct a seminar, so to speak, I was definitely elated for the opportunity. And so we're going to get started. You see the cover page there. It outlines what we're going to be talking about today. And we're just going to basically be highlighting just two perspectives here. What your children can be susceptible of in regards to fatherlessness, and also what you can prevent as it pertains to your measure of involvement. Next slide, please. And yes, and so it actually outlines here. This is more like what I consider to be a synopsis of what we'll be looking at. And you see the 11 highlighted sections there in terms of the susceptibilities that children who encounter fatherlessness that they face on a daily. Having been a social services attorney, having represented foster youth throughout the state of Maryland, I probably represented close to 800 foster youth, and also having represented single parents and custodial disputes. I've seen all of this firsthand. And so we're going to tackle all of these today, and then we're also going to get into some preventative measures as to what you can do as an involved father to help curtail some of these susceptibilities that your children may face. Next slide. The first one we're going to look at is called perceived abandonment. It speaks about the level of hopelessness a child feels when their father is just not involved. The lack of attachment. There's always that question why that child wants to explore. That child often blames themselves. Why am I not worthy? And this is what you really see in regards to a shot to the child's self-esteem. Why doesn't my father want me? So they're in that constant search realm of why. And what you would also see later is that this can translate into anger, that sense of not belonging, not being able to identify the parent who helped give life to you don't want to be involved, don't want any form of an attachment. So that question of why is quite fleeting for that young person. And as you can see here on this side, on this particular slide, this resentment can easily morph into uncontrollable anger if not redirected into or channeled correctly. And if uncontrolled anger is indeed a gateway to the criminal justice system, we're going to look at that later as well. Additionally, anger stemming from abandonment can make it difficult for juveniles to establish friendships and also relationships. So if they don't have any outlets to help balance themselves, you will often see them implode. They don't have any social awareness, no social interactive or interpersonal skills to be able to sustain friendships or to have that sense of development or sense of worth to feel like they belong. And so those insecurities are also rooted in a sense of how these young people process fatherlessness. Next slide. Attachment issues. This is another critical point in representing foster youth. You would see that the lack of self-worth that they basically were deficient of due to not knowing or not having a relationship with their father, they begin to have attachment issues, whether it's attaching to the wrong people, place, or things. Basically investing their time and attention in places they simply did not need to be. And this is what you see with children who, again, encounter fatherlessness. Children who come from a father absent home are more likely to experience attachment related problems than those from a two-parent household. And that's from a study in the mid 90s. I use sort of like statistics from different eras so that you can see not much has changed, whether it's contemporaneously or from the mid 90s. I have some statistics from the 80s as well as the 70s. And you can see over a generational span, these issues has been they've still remained rather prevalent. Attachment issues that also may result and may produce the inability to form a strong caregiver bond. It's hypervigilance to anger. It also may result into conduct problems that the child may have. The active involvement of a father with his children can promote empathy and self-control for the child throughout their life. So again, your measure as a father, the more you're involved, the more you can curtail the wrong attachment issues for your child. It all stems to your measure of involvement. You can't just be present. You have to be involved with your child's day-to-day activities, day-to-day life, day-to-day interactions, and so that you can just help in their overall growth and development. Next slide. Child abuse. And again, you also have to realize as a father, your lack of involvement, it makes your child susceptible to being impressionable to other people. Most importantly, if you're not going to be present with your child, how can you be a protector of your child? And so what you would find, particularly dealing in the child welfare system, I would say almost 8 out of 10 cases where I had severe child abuse, where I witnessed severe child abuse and representing a foster youth, whether it was in Baltimore City, Anne Arundel County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, 8 out of 10 times that child was a product of a fatherless home. So the fathers are not going to be there to interact, to protect, to ensure that their child has proper barriers, proper things in place to ensure that their safety and well-being. That child is going to be more prone and more susceptible to experience some form of child abuse throughout the course of their life. It says their children that grow up in such households are much more likely to be the victim of physical, including sexual abuse and neglect compared with those who grow up in a two-parent household. Children who grow up in a single-parent home are twice as likely to be the subject of physical and/or emotional abuse. In addition, the absence of a father results in increased psychological burden on the child as he or she must make sense of why his or her father is not present. Again, it's that guilt factor, that constant, continuing question of why. Why is my father not here to protect me? Why is my father not here to help me process life issues? And so this level of guilt makes the child more susceptible to child abuse. Next slide, please. Childhood obesity. Now, I must admit, when I was researching and preparing for today, this is one I found quite interesting to stumble upon, because you think about why does it make a difference in regards to a two-parent household in regards to healthy eating or lifestyle physical activity. But I found that children who with higher body mass indices, BMIs that is, are more likely to come from a father absent home, and that's as recently as 2002. Another study found that a father's parenting style was a better predictor of whether a child will become obese. Fathers who were present and used more authoritarian parenting styles had children who were more physically fit than fathers who were absent. I found that to be rather critical. And so, because fathers, we kind of validate ourselves or some sense of our self-identity is through physical activity, whether that's appearance-based or job-related. And so that translates into your parenting style as well. So you basically, the more active you are, your children are always watching. The more prone your children are to pick up physical activities, whether it's sports, whether it's working out, some form of self-identity to ensure their overall health. Same way with eating every night with your children, just being at the table. They follow your lead in regards to what to put on the table, the portion sizes, all of those things. It's a form of discipline as to their wants versus their needs in regards to their selectivity of food. So again, your measure of being an involved father could help curtail childhood obesity and also ensure your child's overall physical health and well-being. Next slide. Criminal justice system involvement. This is a big one. Again, as I mentioned, working in child welfare, I also had some youth who were also dually committed, both with the Department of Social Services as well as with the Department of Juvenile Services. And this is rather eye-opening experience that I really had during my tenure in Baltimore City, where I was a child welfare attorney for 6 years, representing youth, and it was almost like a pipeline. They come from a broken, fatherless home. They entered in foster care due to some form of abuse and neglect. And if we don't have the right type of community wraparound services in place, once that child reaches a certain age, the offenders are becoming younger. They transition right into either the juvenile justice system or, depending on the nature of the crime and their age, right into the criminal justice system. And so it all stems in the root of it in regards to, if you trace it back, what was the measure of the father's involvement or the absence thereof. So it says the more opportunities the child has to interact with his or her biological father, the less likely he or she is to commit a crime or have contact with the juvenile justice system. And so youth who never had a father living with them had the highest incarceration rates. And so that just speaks to where we're at as a society. And I want fathers just to understand that your measure of being present, of being involved, it could really help with your child's decision making, sense of self-discipline, sense of self-worth, those type of abilities, and you elevate the sense of who they are. They won't go out and commit crimes. But it starts with your measure of being able to be involved. The absence of a father in a child's life may also increase the odds of his or her associating with delinquent peers. A 2002 DOJ survey of 7,000 inmates revealed that 39% of jail inmates lived in mother-only households. And so I find that that really resonates with me as an adjunct professor who teach in the prisons, both at Dorsey Run Correctional Facility as well as JCI, Just Correctional Institute. 90% of the inmates, my inmate students are fathers. And I would say probably almost 100% of them come from fatherless homes. So you're looking at things that are cyclical and that are generational. So we have to, do things to help change our mindset as to how we process fatherhood. Next slide, please. Gang involvement. Again, either I tell a lot of the men in the class I teach through Anne Arundel Community College that you're either going to be involved or you're going to raise your child, or society will. And your lack of involvement is going to make your child more susceptible to societal hazards. Gang involvement is that. Your child is going to be attracted to the wrong people, person, place, or things if, in fact, they don't have a form of a bond or an attachment of some measure of attractiveness with you. If you're not validating your child, if you're not advocating on behalf of your child, if you're not increasing that child's self-worth or that child's self-esteem, they're going to find it from somewhere, whether it's through the wrong friends or gang involvement. That would be their family that they would tell you, hey, they embraced me, they were there for me when I didn't have anyone, gave them a false sense of involvement, which, as you can also see, all of these factors that we're highlighting today, they all intertwine with each other. Gang involvement can also intertwine with attachment issues, abandonment issues, as well as the criminal justice system. It says a high percentage of gang members come from father-absent homes, possibly resulting from a need for a sense of belonging. Gaining that sense of belonging is an important element for all individuals. Through gangs, you find a sense of community and acceptance. In addition, the gang leader may feel the role of a father, often leading members to model their behavior after that individual. So it becomes cyclical. And as you know, with gang culture, they also commit crimes, many realms of different crimes. And so we have to ask ourselves as fathers, when we walk out on our children, when we're not there for them, what exactly are we saying? What exactly are we making them susceptible to? It literally could be a life and death situation, because when your measure of involvement, it increases their life chances in so many different ways. Next slide. Mental health. Again, as I spoke on this earlier in regards to the attachment and abandonment issues, that, a lot of children, what you will begin to see as they age up, I'm working in foster care for over 16 years. One of my most difficult clients, I would say, will always be like the teenage girls. And I'm working on my next book is focuses on this particular demographic, because they're developing and they're also trying to find their self-worth and identify with who they are, all the while being, not having that father around and being attracted and being also attracted to the wrong young men who also lack a sense of self-identity. And so for so many reasons, that's a lot to try to untangle, along with their interactions day to day with other girls from similar demographic backgrounds. This mental health piece, if it's left untouched, can really lead them into so many different areas of depression, feeling senses of suicidalness, and also we never think about the baggage that we take from our childhood. I still counsel men today in prison, and really they would tell you, some have been in prison 20, 30 years, they would tell you much of their issues that really promoted their life of crime resonated and were actually produced during their childhood. that lack of self-worth, that sense of worthlessness that they had, their father not being there to help validate them. All of those things will respond during their childhood. So it says fatherless children may start thinking that they are worth less than other children who have fathers and wonder why their father abandoned them. And children really begin to see this in high school. Is the father showing up for the father-daughter dance? Is the father showing up to the football games? They're looking around and they see their friends, their close friends, their fathers are present. And so now they're trying to come to grips with, well, where's my dad? Why is he not coming around? How many lies and excuses I have to make for him? And so that's when you get to see this early onset of depression, thoughts of anxieties, social withdrawals, and also just being absent from school altogether. Now you have a sense, a high level of truancy that's involved. Next slide. Substance abuse. Again, your child, in terms of what they're going to be experiencing, in regards to, they don't have that father there to show them, to really impart upon them the hazards of life. They're going to be attracted to trying and doing things that their friends perceive them to want. They're going to be attracted to want to be more exploratory. There's no father there to instill that level of discipline. So this is what your child is going to grow susceptible to, whether it's alcoholism, whether they have these new type of electronic cigarettes out now. Overall, just some form of, or it could be actually be not only just substance abuse, it could also be selling drugs. Going back to our previous conversation on the criminal justice system, it says children who grow up in a home where a father is not present are at greater risk for abusing alcohol and other drugs. In addition, children who come from a father absent home are at greater risk of using illicit drugs at a younger age. Further research examined the impact of father absences on African American boys. According to the findings, the boys who came from a home without a father were more likely to use drugs than those who came from a home where a father was present. Again, a father, your measure of being involved, being in tune. And when I say involved, I don't just mean present. You got to have you need to know the ins and outs in terms of who your child is hanging out with, and you have to converse with your child, knowing your child's patterns, knowing their dislikes, knowing your measures of distrust. You got to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations with your child. That's involvement. You got to be able to tell your child the hard truth. In order for you to help curtail any form or sense of substance abuse, you have to get in there and be willing to get dirty. What I mean? You can't just be acquiescent to wanting to be your child's friend. You have to be involved to save their life. It's literally a life and death situation. Next slide, please. Poor school performance. This speaks to the measure of truancy. It speaks also to lack of self-worth. This also speaks to just a sense of inadequacy, poor study habits, lack of self-discipline, and most importantly, a lack of focus. So all of these collaboratively go together, whether it was the mental health we mentioned, the attachment issues, the abandonment issues. All of it speaks to, how do I view myself as a child in light of, my father didn't view or love me enough. It speaks to just how much fatherlessness is rooted in selfishness. And so children, they're still children. They're trying to actually process this. And so you see the impact of this within their school performance. It says in the second bulleted point, children from father absent homes are also less likely to pursue higher education. Studies have also found that 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. Fatherless children have more trouble academically, scoring poorly on tests, reading, mathematics, and thinking skills. So we're talking about all those STEM subjects. Children from father absent homes are also more likely to be truant, more likely to be excluded from school, more likely to leave school at age 16. And so now you're looking at, okay, hey, I don't have my dad there, don't have any form of formal education. So what's the likelihood I'm gonna be employable? What's the likelihood I'm gonna be able to go to college? What's the likelihood I'm gonna be able to make good decisions in regards to my peers, the friends, and the places I go? Again, you see this is another gateway into the criminal justice system. This is another gateway into mental health issues, another gateway into substance abuse as well. Hence, an involved father is indeed the greatest indicator to curtail these social ills, increase the life chances of children, and combat the school to prison pipeline. So we want to see the root of some of these things. Look at how well that the father was involved and was able to be an identifiable factor for the child's development, growth and development. Next slide, please. Poverty and homelessness. And again, they're not going to school, they're not going to be employable, they're going to be more susceptible to poverty and homelessness. Studies have shown that the cause of father's absence matters little in relation to poverty and divorce. Children from father-absent homes may also be more likely to shoplift and become chronic shoplifters. One of the more challenging populations that we have in the child welfare system is our adult-aged teens who are aging out. That 17 to 19-year-olds who don't really want to remain in care, don't have the necessary life skills, may have some tangible mental health issues going on, don't identify with their father, but yet they sense and they long for the sense of wanting to be independent for whatever that means in terms of their processing. And so they're really challenging. So because they're legally they're an adults, but they're also grossly unprepared for independence. And so you're leading them out into a world with basically, with no sense of who they are. And so we have to ensure that that population is well nurtured and well cared for. And again, this is another population that don't have an involved father. They deal with a high sense of fatherlessness, and they can become more susceptible to substance abuse and particularly poverty and homelessness. And then you see the cycle repeats itself. Next thing you know, they're having children and the same issues that child will grow up to be susceptible of as well. Next slide. So I wanted just to highlight like what is legacy, how because when fathers, the reason why I called this session beginning with the end in mind, because you become fathers, but you also have to think about once you become a father, what is going to be your end goal? What would your children say when you're not around? What is your end game? What would that look like? Most importantly, how would your children describe you to others who don't even know you? Would they admire you? You have to also think about what you want to leave behind them, what you want to leave behind for them. And so when I became a father and I was having all daughters, you always long for that son. And so my initial focus was really how I wrote my first book, 14 Virtues of a Good Father. Once I realized I was having all daughters, it was like, okay, who are they going to marry and what am I going to do about it? Who are they going to be in terms of young ladies? And so I kind of began with that focus. Every day, that's your goal. You beginning with your legacy in mind. And so a lot of fathers, we don't do that. We have no conscious contemplation in regards to fatherhood. And so that's why for so many fathers, they're able to just walk away so easily. And so I wanted to really focus here in regards to legacy. What are you leaving behind? What are you passing along to your offspring? And legacy is actually defined as something handed down for one who was gone before. And so, your children, they speak to that. Your biggest compliment as a parent is, the product of your children, the summation of their whole in terms of who they grow up to be. And so that's what we have to begin with as a parent and as a father particularly. Next slide. This is the 5-generation rule. Again, it speaks to a lack of awareness in regards to when fathers decide to walk away, they don't understand the impact that it could have for generations going forward. So the 5-generation rule basically says a father's legacy, impact, and reach, it goes through 5 generations. How a parent raises their child, the love they give, the values they teach, the emotional environment that they offer, the education they provide. It influences not only their child, but 4 generations to follow. But on the flip side of that is also true. Their lack of involvement impacts and can plague generations 5 times over going forward as well. That's what they like to call generational curses, so to speak. The 5-generational rule works both ways. If we fail to work at being good fathers, our neglect can plague generations as well. We have to think about that and realize that your decision to not be involved is not just about you, you're actually creating something that can take generations and livelihoods and lifehoods to actually undo. Next slide. And I'm just want to just talk briefly about how fatherhood is a privilege. That's how you have to look at it. Can't look at it as a burden. This one thing I really had to enlighten a lot of my clients on when I got into private practice. I was representing a lot of single dads, whether it's through child support hearings, custodial disputes, visitation matters. They wanted to put a price tag and think it was a substitution in terms of, hey, as long as I'm paying something, I don't really, my involvement is like, it's choice worthy. So their views on fatherhood, they didn't look at it from a realm of it's a privilege. Not everyone can be a father. There's plenty of people wanting to have children, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to. And so, but for you to just have this flexibility to say, hey, I can walk away and throw money at it, realizing all the things and susceptibilities we've already spoken about, I think is just a wayward man who don't really know himself. It's probably not a man at all. So, but we view fatherhood as a privilege. It can change our mental pathology in regards to our willingness to be involved. It says the legacy you leave behind will speak louder than all of your contemporary actions. Your patience, you may be tested at times, but fatherhood must always be viewed as an honor because your measure of involvement will speak to how your name is remembered. And so we move with that perspective. I think our society will move forward as a whole. And I say at the end, remember, there's a father absence crisis in America. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 19.7 million children, more than 1 in 4, live without a father in the home. Consequently, there's a father factor in nearly all social ills that we've already spoken about. So, next slide. So I want to just go over some tools in regards to, okay, so we heard about the social ills. So what can I do if I want to be an involved father? But one question I often used to hear when I was representing single dads, hey, my father wasn't there. I want to be involved, but I just don't know how. What are some things I can impart through my day-to-day interactions with my child? What should I be teaching them just so I can walk in a good measure of fatherhood? So that's what we're going to look at here briefly before we wrap up. Next slide, please. Self-identity. This is the big one. In my book, The 14 Virtues of the Good Father, this is the first one. The first chapter, the first virtue is self-identity. A child, a child must identify. A child must know who they are. A lot of the youth sessions that I run, a couple of my mentoring programs I do on Saturdays, that's one question that we often ask the youth: who are you? I'm not asking you to give me your resume. I'm not asking you to tell me your hobbies, but who are you? What's your purpose? Why are you here? What are you gonna? What are you gonna do in life? Who do you define yourself to be? What's the summation of your values? And a lot of adult men can't answer that. You ask them that question, and they go to they go to talk about their resume, what schools they went to, what jobs they worked at, but or their material possessions. But that who are you question, how do you identify? What are your influences? What are your deeds? What's your character? So, and again, when someone don't understand who they are, they're not in touch with their purpose. That's when they fall susceptible to all of those 11 things that we outlined earlier. So your measure as a father, you must have a continuous commitment to help your child find their self-identity. Next slide. Accountability and discipline. And again, as I tell a lot of young people, on the flip side of every coin is one side is choices, the other side is consequences. Can you be accountable? Can you own your mistakes? You can't change it unless you own it. You got to teach your children some measure of accountability and discipline. I'm a huge accountability and discipline person. It's not going to sound good. It may hurt. It may cut. But hey, I can literally be literally saving your life as opposed to perpetuating a lie, leading you to a life of destruction. So I said, you either make yourself accountable or you will be made accountable by your circumstances. The moment you accept responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you can gain the power to change anything in your life. If you remember that, you'll always be blessed because of it. And then I use a phrase here from Benjamin Franklin that says, I never knew a man who was good at making excuses, who was good at anything else. So If you're trying to be excellent, you can't be, it's not consistent with you being a career excuse maker. Next slide. Humility is big. And so you can't talk about humility without talking about pride, because they go hand in hand. Reason why I have this here, what you really want to, is one of the virtues in my book as well. What you really want to highlight to your children is that sometimes, and most importantly as fathers too, because men, we deal with this warped sense of pride, and the distinguishable factors is humility is concerned with what is right, and pride is concerned with who is right. You find where men fall into this trap where, they can't, they can't ask for help. They feel as though they need to know everything. That's how you see jealousy and envy begin to really spawn. These levels of insecurities are perpetuated over time. They think their greatest manhood is them being, their greatest asset to manhood is them being able to know everything. Actually, that makes you rather ignorant, because, the summation of who you are is knowing what you don't know. And so humility in its simple sense is the ability to consider others ahead of oneself. So, you can put pride aside and really just seek help when you need it. And so can you allow your mind to be stronger than your emotions? Is another question I ask here. Another question is, are you willing to ask for help without fear of judgment? Fear is another issue with a lot of men. They fear how they're going to be judged. They fear that they're going to be measured as inadequate. So when you put that aside and realize to say, hey, being a father is a privilege. I'm going to seek help, seek resources where I can become a better father. I can tell myself the truth. That's a humble man, and that's something that you should try to reproduce in your children. Next slide. The impact of positive peer pressure. And so I put this here because not all peer pressure is negative. When you say peer pressure, it always has a negative inference or negative connotation. But some peer pressures could be positive. I remember when I graduated from American University, they wanted to mail me my LLM degree. And I said, no, I'd rather do it in person. They said, oh, you got to wait 5 months. You can get it mailed to you in December, and we're not going to have our spring session, our commencement, until in May. And I said, no, I'd rather walk and participate in the spring commencement, because it may be a young person out there to say, hey, instead of me doing these negative things in my life, if I see that man walk across the stage who I can identify with, instead of doing this, I can do that. You never know, because children are always watching. So they're looking for good influences, particularly those whose fathers are not present. So always warn your child to make themselves attractable to people who are going places, people who are doing things. And I like the African proverb that says, show me your friends and I will predict your future. So if you're the smartest person in your circle, you may want to enlarge your circle so that you can help, elevate yourself, your thoughts, your minds, and also your choices and decisions. Next slide. Commitment and consistency. Children are accustomed to being lied to, as if they're accustomed to the father saying things but not following up with actions. And so I say here, father, our two best abilities are availability and responsibility. And I do a lot of with my children. They have a lot of affirmations that they say every morning, just to help produce and give them a heightened level of self-identity. And one, when we outline our definition of consistency, is all day, every day. Can you be committed? Can you be available? Can you be responsible? I've been that kid growing up with a teen mom, dad not there, wondering when he was going to come around. So as a father, we have to realize that our time is irreplaceable. Nothing can replace your time, not simply your words nor your money. And so one of the scriptures that I like is, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, and I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. So it's not just about us getting older. It's about us getting wiser, being more committed, being more disciplined in our walk through fatherhood. Next slide.
Yes, I just want to also say we have about 5 more minutes before we'll move to questions.
Excellent. There's a couple of quotes that I highlighted that I thought was rather good. Aeneas Williams, NFL Hall of Fame defensive back, he said, leave on empty. And I thought about that. He said, you don't want any regrets in life. A lot of wisdom is rooted in regrets. And so when you leave here, again, that speaks towards your legacy. you want to leave on empty, that you gave everything towards fatherhood. Al Sharpton, he said, one of the hardest things I ever done in life is facilitating the eulogy of someone who contributed nothing to society. Again, that's the summation of a negative legacy. Trying to find the words to say what did this person really add to society? Uh, President Obama, he said, any fool can have a child. That doesn't make you a father. It's the courage to raise a child that makes you a father. Again, that also speaks to what we just saw with the previous slide about commitment and consistency. Dr. John Gottman, fathers are probably the most important predictors of emotional development for sons and daughters. We often miss that part out with the daughters because, studies have shown that your daughters, their self-esteem, their first love interest should be their father, but their self-esteem is rooted in regards to the relationship that they have with their father. And so I do a whole segment that with teen girls. And so the next question, excuse me, I'm gonna go to the next slide, and then before we take questions, these next couple of slides just highlighting some pictures here, and I do these in group settings sometimes. This is a picture of Richard Williams. A lot of people don't know Richard Williams. Richard Williams has no career statistics as a professional athlete. He's contributed very little in terms of his professional career, his professional prowess in regards to the sport of tennis. But if you look at the next slide will show the fruits of his labor. Even though he didn't make it professionally as a tennis star, he poured everything that he had into his daughters, both Venus and Serena Williams, who would go down as Hall of Fame tennis players. The next slide. This is John David Washington. John David Washington, little do people know, he's the all-time leading rusher at Morehouse College. That's football, that is, all-time leading rusher for the football team. It's a historically black college, all-male school in Atlanta. He's an all-time leading rusher playing football, but he really, he started off going to a developmental football league overseas, and he had spent a little bit of time with the St. Louis Rams. Football career didn't really take off, but he was able to do what he needed to do to chart his own path in life, despite, the path that his dad made. He made a name for himself. The next slide. The next slide highlights his father, Denzel Washington, accomplished actor. But John David Washington, through his father's measure of involvement, has charted his own path, being nominated previously. One movie he was in was nominated for an Oscar and one of Spike Lee's movies. But the fact that you can look up to your father as a role model and you can walk in his path, start out one way, but then come back and channel your own way due to the influences of your father, due to the legacy, due to your measure of your father's involvement, speaks to these men as being celebrated fathers. And so I'm gonna leave it right there and leave room for questions. I think that was my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. So if there are any questions, I'll leave room for those right now.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, let me just check the chat real quickly. One question is, what is the best way to leave your mark on the world, to say that you were here for?
I would say one best way is being in tune with who you are, with your self-identity and your overall purpose. And then once you have that and you wrote down a vision in regards to what you want to do, the factors that you identify with, and I would say every day you move forward with facilitating that, whether you see that tangibly or every day you're doing those things to work towards your purpose. And then once you see that manifest, that's what you have to, be comfortable with saying, this is what I'm going to leave behind. A lot of parents do that through their children. They judge their measure of success by, hey, how successful are my children? A lot of people can do that through redemptive type of qualities. My life wasn't perfect, but I was able to redeem myself. I was able to overcome setbacks. I was able to overcome temptations. I was able to basically overcome hardships to reach a measure of success. I want to be careful to say, hey, you didn't contribute anything to society because there's nothing tangible. There's nothing rewarding about it. But if you produce successful children, children who know who they are, in tune with their purpose. They're able to be celebrated and valued by the mark you made as a parent. That's successful. That speaks to who you are as a person. That speaks to what you're leaving behind. That speaks to your legacy, and that speaks to your mark, that you were here and that you was a productive person.